Hello friends, welcome back to University of Dice. This is the State of Control video that I promised in my recent video that talked about Dice Fight XL. I'm going to talk about the position that Control and maybe to a lesser extent mid-range decks are in right now, and see what some of the ways forward might be in the short term. Now, I don't know if this is new or not. If someone already came up with this, I haven't seen it. It's entirely possible someone has come to a similar realization with other competitive card games out there, but I think this is important to look at. And even if it's applicable to other games, I think the way it works with Dice Masters is unique due to the types of effects we have. And I'm calling this effect, as you've probably guessed, and you can read the screen while I pontificate here, the burden of interaction. So, the burden of interaction, what the heck does this mean? The idea is that aggressive interaction in this game uses quick but temporary effects. So on the one hand, they are fast. You can activate them, a global. It's just there. It's available. It's on the table. You pay. It's whatever. But the drawback is it's temporary, and I suppose also that it's available to your opponent. Control are slower effects, but they're persistent. So these are things that live perhaps on a character card, like Pip the Troll. Right? He has a control effect that makes global abilities more expensive, but you have to buy him and get him in the field. So there's more setup time. Once he's there, though, it's persistent. And it lasts, and that's great. So characters with persistent effects have a cost and investment to set up as the drawback. This balance is currently skewed. There are very few and almost no ways to invest more in the control side to protect from the aggro stuff. So the aggro stuff is actually much more impactful than the control stuff can be. The interaction dance is actually one-sided, particularly because of the force attack global. I'm going to talk more about that with this chart later. Remember it for now. Now, force attack globals are not new, but they're way more difficult to deal with presently because there's no analog to that human paladin there. Human paladin was a staple on control teams because it meant that your stuff couldn't be targeted by global abilities your opponent used. Now, other decks could still interact, yes, for sure, but you needed to be ready for this. It made the game very tactical, and well, the games lasted a little bit longer, and that was fine. It was in a good way. Typhoid Mary could turn off a character-based force attack, but not slingers. In essence, there's actually no way to interact with slingers. If it's on the board, you have to be able to win without caring about it. So if you are thinking force attack global, I'd probably take slingers, though in the end that could not matter because of things like Angela. Rail Angela is a really good bet. Since she gives everything infiltrate, you can just do that one damage and return it to the field if it's unblocked. And if it gets KO'd from a blocker, that might be a little tougher, but some of your cards that will still be more difficult to do, at least. Then you can Typhoid something like Mr. Sinister and turn off his global. That seems to be really good, too. Now, but these force attack globals and the difficulty of interacting with them, that's why it's difficult for control right now. There's actually no good way to establish inevitability. If you're unfamiliar, the player with inevitability is a player that's going to win if the status quo stays as it is. Their victory is inevitable, right? Control win cons, classically, that are an example of this, include Nova. Very easy to see how that works. He sits in the field for a while, that damage just adds up on your opponent, and it's done. But, since cards like that need to stay in the field, they can just be force attacked away. Sure, your opponent might take some damage, but as long as it's not 20 damage, they don't care. And that brings up something else, something about win conditions that, well, could exist right now, but don't always. There are a lot of cards that have a hard time doing what they want to do. I like these cards above my head here. They're great win conditions, but for a different meta, one we'll probably, hopefully, see soon. Because these things need time to set up, or they need time to do the work that they want to do. Usually what happens is you use control pieces to give you the setup time that you need, but you can't do that right now because they can also easily be taken off the board, or you might simply lose before you've established anything there. And that brings us back to this graph. So countering something represents an opportunity cost and one you'll never get back. So if we look at this chart, Right now, control effects can be removed very easily with minimal counterplay, which means they cost a lot to set up, but end up being temporary. So that ruins the balance there, right? The control stuff, it costs time and energy to set it up, but once they're there, they're persistent. But you can make those temporary very easily right now. And unless you can get one of the previous things going, they don't contribute to a win condition. Control pieces are usually cards that help a player build inevitability. Right now, they're just lose less cards. Again, because it's difficult to get the more expensive stuff that we saw on the last slide set up. So lose less means you're still going to lose. It'll just take a little bit longer, and you actually might be further behind because you didn't buy something that'll help you win. Angela gives us possibilities, but you can't miss it for it to work. Nefarious Broadcast gives us possibilities, but you can't miss it for it to work. But let's humor ourselves and say, yeah, there's a control team. This is quick and dirty. It might look something like this. I don't know. I put this together. I didn't playtest anything. This is just what it could look like. So you could, for example, go Mystique or Wong into Angela to deal with force attacks, and then Typhoid Mary, particularly if there's Mr. Sinister. If there isn't, you might be able to wait on her. But once you've stabilized the board, you go for Colossus and get all that stuff going, Colossus being your win condition. You need stuff to sit in the field. Colossus rewards you for having stuff sit in the field. Could work really nicely. You have Joker and Counter. You could put in Counter-Strike as a global to help with some ramp. Right now I have Nefarious Broadcast in there. I don't know. Joker's your primary form of ramp, plus you're relying on whatever your opponent brought, and the ways that you can use Dark Phoenix. This is the uncommon. Any rarity will do. Again, this is not playtested at all. This is quick and dirty. If you're going to be successful with a team like this, you need to be very particular with your buys and very, very disciplined. Now, Poison Ivy's there if you anticipate seeing things like Master Mold. That could be very nice too. All right. Now, Nefarious Broadcast, by the way, it was on that deck. It's a possibility. I don't know. I could see putting Counter-Strike in there. As I said, it might be a trap. This is a die where you don't want it to come up energy because you need it to roll action. It will only be up some of the time to protect you from force attack globals or stop your opponent from ramping, and it does nothing to help you win. Basic action cards are cards I'm generally not a fan of outside of the specific circumstances because they have the same drawbacks that characters do, but then they have short-lived effects unless we're talking a continuous die. So I'm often skeptical about them. If you were going to use Nefarious, a possible build path for this deck could be Nefarious into Angela, then into Typhoid. You just have to test and see what helps your board stabilize. But that's the most important thing, is to get a stable board. I'm not going to say Nefarious Broadcast doesn't work, but it is going to be less consistent. Now, on this flip side, Typhoid and Angela are possibly too slow, but I can look at those two cards and build a team around them that stabilizes my field long term, and I can't do that with Nefarious Broadcast. Regardless, control is in kind of a tough spot. This deck might be something, but then again, maybe not. I don't know. So what are some of the takeaways? The meta's the meta, right? I'd argue it's not a particularly healthy meta right now without strong representation of mid-range and control archetypes. And there's not really a ban or errata that can change that. You're not going to remove all the force attacks from the game. That makes no sense. It is a shame that we don't get Secret Wars before Worlds. What are you going to do? So how do you succeed right now? I think it's probably best and most consistent to go with an aggressive team. So have that plan, stick to it, be aggressive, and not so tactical. I'm not saying don't build some outs in your team for bad rolls, but you really want to aggressively stick to your plan and smash face. One card win conditions are going to be therefore the most consistent, the best. So we're talking Barry Allen, Master Mold. We've seen some frontline stuff as well. Cards that are decks rather that are primarily focused to win with that one thing. If you want a force attack, either use slingers or take a character, but do some stuff to make it so they can't just Typhoid Mary that decision away. Realize that if Angela can be a thing that force attack might be a little more challenging anyway. Still probably worth including if you have the slot just to force your opponent to play around it. Finally, you just have to be as efficient as humanly possible with energy and die purchases. That's always been the case, but it's especially the case right now. Don't overbuy, and if you get temporarily blocked off, definitely don't overbuy. Do what you can to maintain the integrity of your field and your bag management, and kind of go from there. So that's the state of control as I see it right now. It's a little bit fraught. I'm not saying it can't be successful. It's just going to be less consistent. And the teams that are the most successful in Dice Masters are the teams that are most consistent. If you can find a way to build up, punish some globals, or make it difficult to use globals, you can probably find ways to do something. You're going to have to be very careful in how you play. Generally speaking, control decks take a lot of skill to pilot anyway. That's probably what you have to look at right now too. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for more. This is Dave signing off, University of Dice. We'll see you soon. Bye.